Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christy McMillan. I'm the Director of Learning and Engagement here at the Asheville Art Museum, and I feel absolutely terrible about sending the wrong login information yesterday. So I assume that there will be some folks, Sarah, that will be joining us probably a couple minutes late once they see my email. But in the meantime, I'm glad that everyone that's here so far got that email and got the login information. I'm so sorry about that. I'm pleased to be joined this morning by Sarah, or I should say this afternoon, by Sarah Reincke, our master docent. She's also the president of our docent corps. So thanks for joining me, Sarah.
Thank you.
Each Friday at 12 p.m., while the museum is closed, docents will lead virtual in-depth conversations about a few artworks in our collection or special exhibitions. The goal is simple: slow down, discover the joy of looking at art, and talk about the experience with others. For today's program, Sarah will lead us on an in-depth interactive conversation about 3 artworks in our collection. We'll spend about 15 minutes or so with each artwork. Sarah will allow us time to look at each work on our own, slowly, before leading a conversation about each one with questions. As participants, we encourage you to engage in dialogue with Sarah, myself, and each other throughout the hour. Just a few notes before we get started. You probably noticed when you logged on that your microphones and video were muted by default. I see that Judy and Sarah have already unmuted their video, and that's absolutely fine. If you'd like to join in and see each other when we're talking, you're more than welcome to do that. I can say that I can't unmute my own because I don't have a webcam on my desktop computer. We do suggest that you choose a quiet room and close the door, silence any alerts from your devices. And if you do choose to have on your video, we suggest not sitting in front of a window, lamp, or other strong light source, as it does affect our ability to see each other. Use headphones and microphone for best sound quality. While you can log on using a smartphone, we do suggest using a desktop, laptop, or tablet in order to see the images and the meeting tools on a larger screen. In just a moment, I will give everyone the ability to unmute yourself at will. So when you are making comments or asking questions, you can unmute your microphone and do so live and in person. You're also welcome to use the group chat. We do recommend, though, that unless you're actively making a comment or asking a question, that you leave your microphone muted. Alternatively, sometimes these conversations, as we've learned over the past couple of weeks, can get a little lively. So if you do prefer to raise your hand in the participant sidebar, I will make sure that there will be a moment for me to call on you. We are recording today's program, so if you prefer not to be recorded, just make sure that you leave your video and audio muted and use the chat box to submit any questions or comments. At this time, I'm going to give everyone the ability to unmute themselves as you would like and ask if anybody has any questions before we get started.
Christy?
Yes, ma'am.
This time in my chat side, it is not when I go to participants. I don't know if other people are experiencing this. Normally an array of yes, no, go faster, go slower, clap, and usually raise your hand is also amongst those choices. It is not for me today.
For you today, it's not there because I've made you the co-host of the meeting.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
But everyone else should have those options in their participation.
All right, I just wanted to make sure everybody did.
You have powers today, Sarah.
Woohoo!
All right. Well, if nobody else has any questions, we will go ahead and get started. I'll turn it over to you, Sarah.
Good morning and afternoon. I'm so glad that you could join us. I think that we're going to be discussing 3 pieces. Christy will be putting up the first one shortly. And we will be talking about many things, but the overriding theme is emotions. So I tried to choose 3 pieces that showed 3 different types of emotions. And so let's just take a look at this. and study it for about 10 seconds. So, what are we looking at?
To me, it looks as an example of what today we would call photo bombing, which is a relatively new thing, although this photo is shot like 1951. And it's the photo bombing is the art of purposely putting oneself into the photo to shift the focus of the photo. So this guy in the front is trying to shift the focus of the photo to him away from the woman framed in the photo, to me.
Okay, so he is interrupting.
Yeah.
Anything else? What else do we see?
Well, she
Sarah.
Good.
Yeah, I have a whole totally different take. I can see where it could be photobombing, but I kind of see her feeling like, well, if you want to act like an idiot, go ahead. I've got my place, my way, and I'm fine with it. It's kind of what I see.
So,
go ahead.
And you're speaking of the woman and
yes, yeah.
and what she is portraying to your eyes.
I'm my own person, and I'm proud of it. And you go ahead and act like an idiot if you want to.
Okay, good, good. So we have a very strong female personality.
Exactly.
And we have a gentleman who may be trying to interrupt. Anything else?
Yeah, I don't see the woman as necessarily reacting to the man. I just see her sort of as distant and separate, you know, looking off into, you know, the sidelines, and but yet strong in her own position.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I would say also that we can tell, I mean, it seems to me that the man is reacting to the person behind the camera, but we can't tell what the woman is reacting to or whether their reactions have anything to do with each other.
Right. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But I did feel that they are reacting to one another. That was my initial sense that, yeah, she's very strong and sure of herself and confident. And he's expressing frustration, I think. That was my take. He's like, aggravation.
Okay. All right. So let's go ahead.
Can you tell me what year this was published?
It was, it's a photograph that was published, that was taken in 1951. So since that question has been asked, let's talk about some other aspects of the photo. What about her clothing?
Sarah, I was struck with the stark and industrial character of the photograph. The background, the corrugated metal building. It's also a very casual photograph. They're dressed casually. The man looks like he's wearing something like a sweatshirt or a pullover. The woman is dressed very casually. And while there's emotion, there's no hint whatsoever of romanticism or really positive emotion at all.
I feel like she's posed.
You feel like she's posed, and the gentleman does look casual. I'm hearing the corrugated metal is accentuates that picture. Do you think that if that background was different, would it change how you might react to the photo?
Well, I think the patterns of the stripes are very interesting because they're slightly off the vertical and they only extend a third of the way down. So you sort of have on the left, you allow it for her, a blank area to sort of frame the woman, yet her two arms, the corrugated stripes are in the one elbow triangle where the other one is the blank. And I just think that draws your eye to that, even though he's in the forefront looking at the camera and she's looking away, maybe even perhaps an expression of being miffed at him being in the picture. So.
Yes. So the negative space behind her on the doorway, if that is a doorway, does that enhance her? And why do you think that that might be?
I actually think it does enhance her. It frames her in some ways. But I also think that the corrugated background makes the picture cold, which the woman who wants nothing to do with the man seems to be in her own world.
And maybe, as I like that you mentioned that the corrugated steel looks cold. Do you think that that also applies to her stance?
Yes.
Yeah, so there's a similarity there. So we're talking about how the corrugated steel fits in with the picture. There's negative space being used. And let's talk about emotion for a little bit. What in your first reaction, what are you seeing the gentleman's emotion as?
Anger and jerky.
And say that again, anger and what?
Jerky.
Jerky.
I see him as kidding around.
Kidding around?
Yes, I get a sense of mischief in trying to do.
So then there is a sense of that photo bomb.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this, go ahead.
Yeah, I also think, realizing that was taken in the 50s, the place of, it was much more of a male-dominated society at that time. And so I can see the mischief in it, but I also feel like she's standing up for herself and for her own being as a woman. And whether he's kidding around about it or not, he's interposing himself and, expressing his emotions that he's not happy about that.
Okay.
So I see his patriarchy is kind of what it shows me.
Right. No, that I think that it can be taken a number of ways. And considering it's 1951, what about her clothing?
Her hair is definitely 1950.
51. Mm-hmm. And the clothes that she's wearing?
It's rather sporty, I think, because I don't recall in 51 skirts being quite that short. I mean, if you wore a dressy skirt, it looks
shorts.
like they're short, or a skort.
Yeah. So does it take a strong woman if she's making a fashion statement, does it fit her personality?
Yes, I think so.
I wonder if she's taking a model's pose. I mean, this is a little thing.
Mm-hmm.
If her shorts would be that creased. I feel like, if she was taking more of a model's pose, she would look more finished.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Does the fact that it's a photo enhance the setting as compared to if it were a watercolor? Would it carry the same amount of emotion, a different emotion?
I think the photograph certainly enhances the starkness of the image and the kind of the coldness of the emotion that's conveyed. And I'd just like to comment about what I call the graphical quality of this. When you look at the cropping when you look at the vertical background, you look at the framings. There are multiple framings in this picture. The framing between the man's hand and his leg, the framing inside the woman's elbow, the parallelism of the woman's elbow and the man's arm and hand. It's just, the longer you look at it, the more compelling it is graphically.
It is. There are a number of triangles in there. Yeah.
And also, along those lines, I just see very heavy diagonals. And whenever I see a diagonal, to me, that's action. That's dynamic, as opposed to, you know, vertical and horizontal. So, and there's so many diagonals, most of which, you know, top to bottom, left to right. But there are some balances also with her other arm and his hand crossing it over.
So
very active.
It is very active.
I think that it's interesting that she has virtually no adornment on her clothing, nor does he. They are
have a cool belt.
Shapes.
Yeah, her belt is a nice breakup. So what would you, if you were to name this piece, what would you name it?
Interplay.
Interplay, that's great.
In the chat box, Judy said Vogue.
Vogue. Does he, and yes, he does have bad teeth.
And
I've noticed that for so long, and I'm like, 1951, well, dentistry isn't what it is today.
But the only thing I wanted to say about the teeth, too, is that it's not a smile. It's definitely like you're going, you know, like you're really, you're frustrated or something. The same with his hand.
Like a grimace.
What about a word like chagrin?
Yeah, probably.
Chagrin.
To me, it looks like a jeer, like he's jeering. Ooh. Like he's angry.
Like leering? Did you say leering?
Jeering.
Oh, okay. Okay.
A couple of people in the chat box said mocking before as well.
Yeah.
He was mocking her.
I have to say this, I have seen this on in street shoots, which is why I have trouble getting out of my head that that's what this is. Because I've experienced, you know, there's a fashion shoot going on and a pedestrian is walking by and suddenly goes, and the camera.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Right.
So that is a photo bomb.
I think the thumbs are very. I think the thumbs are very interesting. That the way her hand is on her hip, but it looks like her thumb is separate from the fist of her hand, and his thumb in the picture is out there as if he's pushing on something. The two thumbs, I think, are very interesting.
Is there a question that you might have for the artist?
I don't know.
Yeah, was this a spontaneous moment that you happened to capture with perfect composition, or was it planned?
I think, Christy, if you would put up the information.
Before we do, Barbara H. had a suggestion for a title, A Day at College After Photography Class.
Oh, I like that. And so this is Jonathan Williams, who attended Black Mountain College for photography. He actually came there to study with Alan Siskin and Harry Callahan. This particular picture, when he got to Black Mountain, he became very, very interested in poetry, and that is actually what led him on through the rest of his career. He was more of a poet than a photographer. But he does have quite an archive of photographs, and many, many, many of them are portraits. Pictures like this, caught in the moment of people. And so I am not sure if this was staged and if Joel, this is Joel Oppenheimer, who's in the foreground, and he's a poet. Francine de Duplessis is a novelist, but he remained friends with them after he left Black Mountain. And actually, while he was at Black Mountain, he started the Jargon Society, which is a very small publishing company that was focused on publishing obscure writers. And the Jargon Society still does publish with the help of the Black Mountain Museum here in Asheville. He was investigated by the FBI when they came to Black Mountain because they felt under J. Edgar Hoover, they felt that it was just a little bit too much avant-garde, a little too communistic, and they came in under the guise of, you're using your VA grant money improperly. But that really wasn't why they were there. And they came back, they were there in 1951 while he was there. They came back in 1956, and at that time, Jonathan Williams was interviewed. And I want to end this piece with just a tidbit of information. He did fall in love with poetry when he came to Black Mountain. And this is something that Buckminster, who was there in 1951, Buckminster Fuller said of him. If poetry is a sound, Jonathan made it. For years, he drove around America in a battered Volkswagen, its trunk full of boxes of books and spread poetry along the way. Buckminster Fuller called him our Johnny Appleseed. So he was multi-talented. And I really like this photograph quite a bit. I sometimes like to think that the Joel Oppenheimer is actually kind of getting on the photographer, because women during World War II had very, very strong roles, and those were all taken away from them when the men came back from war. And she is a remnant of that strong personality, and the bomber doesn't like that. So I love adding the photographer into the piece. It puts a different perspective on it. So shall we move on to the next? Okay. All right. Let's start with emotion. What do we see here?
Well, you see her very interesting expression, and your eye is drawn towards her pursed kind of lipsticked mouth, and her eyes are looking toward the left to what maybe is a window. And it's very interesting with the color, the way the corals or the reds kind of complement each other from her necklace or her frilly collar and her lipstick and further out. So
there are a lot of different values of that color pink. Yes.
It looks reflective, and I almost wanted to say melancholy, but I don't think it's quite melancholy. The best I could come up with was reflective.
She's thinking, reflecting. Yes, what else do we see?
Comment from the chat box, she just kissed the dragon.
So, and this is the dragon, the what's in the window?
Yeah, the dragon is, you can see the dragon and then the top thing that runs along the spine in the window. under the there's also a phallic symbol in there as well.
And you can see his lipstick on his mouth where she kissed him.
Oh, all right.
I
That's
didn't
good.
catch that.
It looks like there's lipstick. There might be lipstick on the mouth of
Oh,
the
okay.
character. It's like the red color red is reflected
Gotcha.
on that shape in the back.
What do you think, what's her attitude towards that shape in the back?
Maybe the dragon kissed her. Maybe she didn't kiss the dragon.
Maybe she's disappointed he didn't turn into a prince and he stayed a dragon.
So, and the piece in the window, everyone, it is a dragon? Do we have are we?
That it was a horse.
A horse, okay, a dragon or a horse, anything else?
There's also a phallic symbol in that.
A phallic symbol?
I'm not nearly as imaginative as everybody else. What I finally thought of was it almost looks like a man who is raising his hat to her. I can't explain the red, where that comes from, but it looks like a head with 3 vertical lines on it, just as an impression of a face.
And so what about the negative space behind it? Does that add anything? The negative space behind the phallic man dragon.
Are you calling the negative space the blue?
Or the white?
And the
not on the sides, but the white in the window.
White and pink.
Isn't the
light pink?
Isn't the white supposed to be the dragon or horse or man or whoever, whatever? Isn't that the white part?
So.
Oh, I see it now. I'm sorry.
Judy made a point that there is pink in there. I didn't see that.
Yeah, there is pink.
And there is
Which
that
also
purple
makes
line that separates the light pink from the white that can't be ignored.
Yeah.
This purple line, the line that is directly to the right of the green form.
No, I'm speaking of the light line between the light pink and the white.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
That's the shape of her head.
Yes.
So could that be a reflection of her?
Oh, that's wonderful. So yeah, so this white space is really, and the negative space is certainly adding some dimension and interpretation to the piece. What about the palette of the whole piece? Do we see, is there anything that is, we see a lot of unity and color value?
Yes.
And what, when you look at her collar, what do you think is going on there? Does that speak to a time, or does it provide movement?
Seems more like a circus.
A circus clown.
Including the tent in the back.
Yep.
Maybe the curtain, the collar.
There's not very much color in this, actually. It's all shades of 1 or 2 different colors. So in looking at her face, what are some of the things that we see?
Well, the blue, you see the blue repeated, and the black, and then the peach, kind of those 3 colors.
Plus the white of her forehead and her face versus her cheeks and her neck, kind of.
Okay, yeah, it's her neck is a little bit different color than around her eyes and her cheekbones and her forehead.
Perhaps light and shadow.
In a shadow. And
it's almost like clown makeup. She's could be a circus performer, and she's made up to be very visible in the performance ring. And I keep getting drawn to these concentric circles, like a huge flower in her hair.
Okay, and so if we're and let's take a look at the part of the screen print that is on the left. That does look like that big flower. I think that you're talking about the part that has the black dot in the middle, and then a light pink, a darker pink,
Yeah.
a white, and then probably a green on the outline. What is that? What is that? What do you see there? We have a flower. Is there anything else?
My first impression was that it was a face.
A face. Christy, can you take the pointer and see to draw maybe the front, the profile of what somebody might be looking at there? And were you thinking of the green, or were you thinking of the pink
I
line?
was thinking more of the pink.
Of the pink line.
Yeah, and it's like almost a reflection of her profile.
In looking at her eyes from an emotion point of view, what kind of emotion do you think that they are sharing with us?
Word that comes to my mind when I look at her face is disdain.
Disdain.
Disdain. I think it's something about the set of her mouth. And Judy had remarked in the chat about her bone structure, and she has really sort of angular bone structure, and then her lip, her upper lip, is sort of pouted over her lower lip, and it looks like a very judgmental look on her face, like something that we can't see is she's very disdainful of or rejecting.
And
I also have seen her as disapproving, so I think that's close, but I'm still stuck on the coloration. And I don't see it as a circus. I'm not sure what I see it as, but it's almost like, as opposed to being in blackface, I see her as being in whiteface, that the white is sort of colored like a mask over her natural coloration.
Yes. So we're now kind of talking about is the white part really her, or is it something that was made up, put on? And as she is looking towards the window, it is not a peaceful look. It is either one of disdain or distrust, disgust. And so we're not really sure what the reflection or the green, mostly green part that is in the window behind her. It may be a dragon or a man, but certainly something that is not bringing her comfort.
But it's interesting, the body language too, because you first don't really notice her shoulders and the way they are, but her face and her eyes are both away, not looking forward. So it's kind of interesting.
Yes, it is. It's very interesting.
Sarah, the more I look at her face, it kind of reminds me of a Phantom of the Opera mask. That only partially covering the face, but that's what comes up for me.
So what do we want to say about her color palette? If it had been different, why do you think this color palette works or doesn't work?
Well, I think she's very elegant, actually. That was my initial response when I saw her. I see what everyone is saying about the mask. I see it just as lighting. very stark lighting, and I love the heart shape in the middle of her face. That creates, it's kind of a pink to me. It's not really a white. And I also got, for some reason, Spanish overtones. Perhaps a fan in the back. I saw a horse initially, and it looked rather exotic to me.
Kathy, where did you see the horse?
Where everyone is seeing the
right here.
Dragon.
dragon.
Yeah.
It has a dreamlike quality.
A dreamlike quality.
Well,
And
she's thinking, or these could be things in her mind that she's thinking of. This horse-like monster things around her, and the palette is dark except for her, and she's fairly delicate, but the background seems to be very dark. So maybe it's some turmoil or inner turmoil, maybe disdain, maybe just pensive, maybe fright or fear. I don't know.
So it's really just 3 different shades. I mean, 3 different colors, lots of different shades within those colors. But it's you know, it's pink, blue, green, and white mostly, and black. So there's 5 colors. But I think that the value of the different colors really is quite striking. Go ahead.
I was going to say there's a lot of contrast in this through the use of the black and the white.
And do you what about the balance? Where we talked a little bit, I think somebody mentioned early on, where was your eye drawn to first? So do you see a balance?
Well, I'm quite impressed, and I've been trying to figure out how it is balanced, because she's on the lower left and she's looking down, and there's not much in that opposite corner other than the blue. But the more I look at it, the more I see that medium tone blue in that top right corner, and her collar, that there's sort of parallels to those shapes, and maybe that's what's helping the balance.
So the shape of what people have called the circus tent at the top, and along the side, going down towards the green dragon arm penis, does kind of match the shape of her collar.
Sarah, Barbara H. had asked, she had said she doesn't see the window. Can we use the pointer to identify? And I'm also, people have said that they see a window a lot, and I'm wondering, do they just mean this part of the print, or do they mean sort of everything that she's against is a window? So that I can point out what you guys are seeing.
I think that I believe, and tell me everybody if I'm not following, it is the area that is behind the green thing. So
here?
No, keep going down to the right of the girl. That whole area that is white, that is, I believe, what people are referring to as the window. And please correct me, crowd, if that is not correct.
Is that what you all were seeing as a window, the sort of much lighter color area?
I didn't see the window. I see a horse and a woman, but I know a lot of people did.
So Elaine says that's what she was seeing as a window. Barbara P. says she also, like Kathy, doesn't see a window. How about you, Linda?
A door into a tent.
Okay, so you see that as sort of an opening, as a door. Okay.
All right.
But I've got
Do you
the
think
right
it's going in?
area.
Yeah. Is it going into the tent, or is she in the tent, or is she outside the tent?
She could be outside the tent, is the way I see it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I saw her as being in a room, and that was a window, that there's a valance at the top and a curtain on the right side. We can't really see what's on the left behind her head. But yeah, I saw the window from the beginning, and it took a long time and others' comments before I saw the horse.
Yeah, I am still not
Me
seeing the
too.
horse.
Me too.
Yeah, I'm not seeing the horse. And, you know, I groom them every single week. So I should be able to see this. But I love that. That is, I mean, that's part of this whole process that I love dearly. Do we have anything else that we'd like to say about this?
Yeah, I'd like to say, you asked about the colors and the limited palette and the values of the colors. And I think, you know, this could be a paint by number painting, but I think the limited colors really work to increase the ambiguity between the figure and the ground and make it all about sort of surface forms instead of, and shapes, instead of depth. You know, so it can either be a horse dragon, or if you're looking at the white as a figure and the blue as the ground behind the figure.
Oh my gosh, guys, I see the horse. He doesn't have any, but he doesn't have any ears.
It took me a while too.
Or it could be, or the white could be the ground and the green is the phallus and a tree or a bush or who knows what's sticking out.
Well,
it could also be a mirror.
It could. It could be a mirror.
Could be a shadow. Could be a shadow of her head.
Does she seem threatened?
No.
Okay.
Regina made a really interesting comment in the chat box. She said that maybe the girl has the skin disease vitiligo and that she's trying to cover it up.
So, what else do we want to say?
We want to know the title.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you.
It's not going to help that much, Judy.
No, it isn't. But I am some information that I can share might, because I took a completely different track then, and I love this because that by sharing our thoughts regarding pieces of artwork, it can expand our views, and I love it when that happens to me. So this is called Girl. It's a screen print. And it was created in 2004 by Gwendolyn Knight Lawrence. Now, Gwendolyn was married to Jacob Lawrence. They were both artists. Jacob might be a little bit more renowned. Miss Lawrence died in 2005. She was in her 90s. So she was creating artwork until the very, very end. Now, Gwendolyn and Jacob were both African American. So, and I knew that, and I must say it did influence how I viewed this piece. They too were at Black Mountain, and they were she and Jacob were invited by Joseph Albers to come and be on the staff at Black Mountain for a summer session, I believe, in 1946. Black Mountain actually started integrating through its faculty in 1944. So they came 2 years later. Black Mountain provided special transportation for them so they could travel safely through the South. They had only been in the South one other time. They never left campus once they got there because they did not feel safe. So knowing that she is an African-American woman, I did get the sense of that's a man or somebody threatening in what the horse, window, dragon area. And that the lower skin, as we had talked about, with people were starting to get to the mask or makeup or whatever, that's kind of the black and white. And I thought that was a bullseye on the left. So I really, because I did know, and that's such a great example of don't look at the information. I mean, it's fun to look at the information last because then you can see where your imagination might have joined up with the artist and where it didn't. So you make no assumptions. And because I knew the background, it was very hard for me to knock down my assumptions about what this piece might mean. So that's one of the reasons why I chose it, because I thought that people would have different reactions to it than I did. Would this be a piece that y'all would like in your home? I would.
I like it.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
I like it quite a bit too.
Yeah, I like it.
Sarah, may I ask you why you chose this to portray emotion or to talk about emotion?
I think it was part of my assumptions, because to me, the green thing in the window is very, very threatening. She is looking at it. She is suspicious of it. Because I knew that she was an African-American woman operating in a white world, I felt that that was all over her face. And I couldn't help but think that, in addition, you know, African Americans now and in the 50s, they might as well have had targets on their back. And I couldn't get away from thinking that the thing on the left was a target. So there's a lot, because of my assumptions, there's a ton of emotion in this piece.
Before we move on, Sarah, a couple interesting comments in the chat box. Barbara P. Noted that there was a similarity in color used to her husband's work.
Yes.
For those that were on Slow Art Friday last week, his was the windows work that we looked at. Judy said, knowing she is an African-American artist gives meaning to a white dragon, as well as the target. So Judy and you had similar feelings about the target. And Kathy remarked that she's shrinking away from it. And I'm not sure if, Kathy, you mean the target or the whatever is happening on the right.
Target.
Okay.
That target, when Sarah mentioned how threatening that green thing was that she was looking at, the way her neck is shaped and all, that's not something, when you are going towards something and strong, you would not be in that position. That's rather shrinking away.
Okay, we're gonna, you know what? We've been taking too much time. So we're gonna move on to the last one because this is really a fun piece as well. Okay, let's take a peek.
It's interesting to me, even though the people are the biggest and in the middle, my eye is drawn to the train going across the window there. It looks to be like a vibrant sunset, which brings me to the clock. It looks like it's about 8:20, which means it might be summer. And then the picture at the bottom going out, it's kind of like your eye is drawn through the entire picture from left to right.
Okay, so we have a time of day, and where our eyes are first drawn. Are others' eyes first drawn to that train with the white steam coming out of it, or where did somebody else's eyes go?
It seems to me the train and the clock, as well as the picture, are the three things that are in focus. The three people are not so much in focus.
Excuse me. Oh, and when you say picture, it is P-I-T-C-H-E-R, correct?
Picture, yes.
Yes, down here. Okay,
Water
gotcha.
picture.
Right, right.
So those are in focus, but the people themselves are not.
Yeah, as far as like facial, like with the woman who is standing, you don't really see any eyes.
Yeah.
Okay, and same with the gentleman sitting. a little bit with the woman who has the pink scarf on. What else do we see?
The man's hands to me seem to be abnormally large, and I can't tell if they're having a conversation or sorting laundry. It's hard to tell exactly what the dynamic is there.
And so what else is going on with those hands?
Well, it looks like one hand is natural color and one hand is in a glove. It looks like, maybe in this time of pandemic, it looks like a glove, on a yellow glove on the first, the guy who's sitting, and the one in the background, it looks even more like a glove because it's kind of cuffed up. It looks like the rubber gloves like you use to wash dishes.
And are you talking about the one that is darker, where his two fingers?
Yellow. The one that's yellow.
One that's yellow.
The
Thank you, Christy.
two figures are yellow. They have yellow. It looks like gloves to me.
Okay.
One hand is brown and one is yellow, and this gentleman also has a yellow hand. So.
Oh, were you talking about the woman? Okay, thank you, Christy. Yep.
Yeah.
So the woman standing has hands that are two different colors, and the gentleman who is seated has hands that are two different colors. And what is that also true of the woman who is seated?
Yeah, it looks like white or pink or some kind of a bandage or something, as someone else might have said.
Okay. So is there any comment that we can make about what the man's profession might be?
I imagined that he could have worked for the railroad and that this was the last train to leave and he's just come home from his job with the railroad, and he's got his gloves on, his work gloves that don't necessarily match.
And what makes you say he may be working for the railroad, Phil?
Well, he's wearing a cap, and then he has on a blue jacket. Just looks like he's in work clothes.
He's in work clothes. And what about the size of his hands? What can we say about the size of his hands? So he's a working man. He may work for the railroad because of his hat.
They're exceptionally large.
They're exceptionally large.
Right. And the colors are interesting because they're dynamic, vibrant colors, the oranges, the reds, the blues. And the man seated has the blue jacket or shirt, and so does the woman standing, and then the woman in the middle is more of a pattern pastel, but there's a lot of colors going on there.
There are a lot of colors. And which color seems dominant?
Blue.
Blue. Blue.
Blue and black.
Okay. So if this gentleman was working for the railroad, for whom, for what is an important piece of his body if he's working for the railroad?
His hat, maybe.
The hat, that signifies it. And the type of work that he might be doing on a train, what parts of the body might that include?
His back and his hand.
His back and his hands.
The steam engine.
Right. So so maybe that's his hands are very important to him, and they're big in this particular piece, and they're two colors. So it might be gloves. Is there anything else that we might assume or defer from having such big, oversized hands?
Well, perhaps the artist is emphasizing the fact that he's a work person, that he's a worker.
Mm-hmm.
He's a worker. He's in work clothes. He probably has just come off a shift. I love it that it was picked up, the time of day was picked up as far as the sunset and the clock right away. So the woman standing, what can we say about her?
It looks a little like she's she has formal wear on, or you know, a nice jacket and a nice skirt. She looks like she's pointing, like we gotta go.
Well, and do you think that they're connected? Do you think that the man sitting down and the woman standing up might be connected?
I don't know. Somehow I think they're all connected. It's a nice kind of domestic but everyday thing. Nobody is looking up, oh, the train's going by. So it must be like a regular train
Every day.
at a regular time. And I sort of think that the three people are portrayed by the colors and their hands and their postures as their different roles in life, their different work.
Different roles in life. So, and do one of the three figures have facial structure, facial expression?
The woman seated there does.
And what do we see? What do you see on her face?
Eye, mouth, eyebrow.
Yeah. Does is she concentrating? Does she look content?
I think all three of them are all focused in on something that's in her hands.
Mm-hmm.
All three figures seem to be focusing in the direction of either something she's holding or in her hands. There seems to be a focus.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of a
She
sponge.
seems to be the busiest of the three. She
Say that
seems to
again?
be the busiest of the three in doing something, and yet she's so if she's the most active one doing something, her colors are so watercolory and muted, and we've been talking about the other two people, but to me she seems like she's really doing something there.
Mm-hmm. And the colors, she has multicolors, much more so than the other two figures. And so does that portray anything to you?
It's almost like the two figures on either side of her represent roles, possibly, and that she is the sort of realistic center, the individual who has a pattern on her shirt, who has a face, who, you know, she's looking at something that's affecting the other two, or the other two have something to do with. But she seems like the real figure in this, and the other two are stylized to represent something.
To me, she is the domestic role in this. The man goes out to work every day and comes back and he's just returned and he's tired. The woman standing up could be their daughter, and maybe she's prepared supper and it's on the stove, but she's dressed up to go out.
Wonderful. So I liked your comment about the woman in the plaid having a different role, a domestic role perhaps. What makes you say that?
Well, she's the one that I see working. I see the other two as observing in this moment. And she's focused on that task, which may have something to do with making or mending clothing. Folding laundry.
Yeah. And there
Folks
are
in the chat, Sarah, we're on the same line.
washing
Elaine said she
clothes.
might be dyeing something. Susan C. said she could be washing or cleaning clothes. Kathy said washing clothes or sewing, but maybe also preparing food.
And so when you are saying, when people are saying that she's washing, you're referring to the layers of cloth that are between the gentleman's green leg and the stool on which she's sitting. Thank you, Christy. Is that right, everybody?
Yes.
And she may be holding a big bar of soap, potentially.
So she is holding something.
That's not a bandaged hand, is it?
No. And that's a recollection. This is a piece that's actually on display in our permanent collection hall. And I have looked at it a lot, but I don't think that she is holding something, but I have never really been able to discern what it is. So it's now 1:01, so I don't really want to go over our time, but I don't want to cut anybody off either. Is there anything else that we would like to say about this piece before I do the reveal?
The colors are fantastic overall. They're beautiful.
I agree. Yeah.
Okay, do you want to show the slide? There we go. So this is another African-American artist, and early on in our discussion, like the first or second person that said something, they said, oh, it's a beautiful sunset. And so the name is Sunset Express, and I love that somebody just got it right on. It is a collage. Romare Bearden is a self-taught artist, and he took things out of, magazines, newspapers, books, whatever he could find to make his art. And he always, throughout his movement in his own arts community, Romare Bearden always empowered and promoted artists of colors. He used personal memories, African-American cultural histories, and literature as the source of his subject matter. And he placed aspects of African-American life within the context of universal themes. One quote that he has, he actually had a lot of quotes, but one quote he has says, "The artist has to be something like a whale, swimming with his mouth wide open, absorbing everything until he has what he actually needs." So I thought that was an interesting quote. And I want to thank everybody for coming. This was my first time doing a Zoom slow art tour. And I just want to thank you all. I mean, this was a lot of fun for me. And I hope that it was fun for you too. It's always fun to talk about art, but yeah, this new format, I found it pretty fulfilling. And I hope that you did too. Are there any questions? Well, I hope that you all come back next week and everybody tell one person. And we'll grow our crowd. So thank you all for coming. Christy, thank you, and the museum. I certainly appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sarah, and thanks everybody for tuning in. Again, I am so sorry about sending the wrong login information. I know that I'm the direct cause of us having a smaller group today, but I am glad that the folks that were on here today were able to join. I think we had a great conversation, as usually, on Slow Art Fridays. Next week, Lynn Goldman, who's one of our touring docents and who happens to be in the room with us today, is leading a discussion on women in art. So the three artworks that she's focusing on from the collection are already posted on the museum's website. If anybody would like to get registered for next week's program, just shoot me an email. And I hope everyone has a great week, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.